Well, we have a pretty big topic we're going to be talking about today, but before we move straight into that topic, I want to make a few things perfectly clear. A while back, we got some information. Upon receiving that information, we were as clear as we could be with BCP about having discovered the information related to the playtest for the old Natsabot trio, the Ravnos, the Tzimisce, and the Salubri. We were clear. We sent a message immediately to BCP support to tell them we had located this. We then had a conversation with Hugh for a little bit. They said they were aware of the leak. And then I made an additional request. I asked that we be able to compare the life cycle of cards as they went through the playtest. Now, his response was less than stellar in saying, I'll ask Ben. We went back and forth a little bit. I never actually got Ben to reply to Hugh, so I took it upon myself to reach out to Ben. I think that when you no one should be out there searching for leaks. In fact, the bottom line of this is that Ben says back to me at the end of the conversation is no, but I would ask that you don't seek out further NDA breaches. To be clear, this was not an active search for NDA breaches. Periodically, I take backups of the GitHub for Lackey. During such a time, there was a leak that occurred where inadvertently the playtest data was updated to the wrong location for user access with incorrect permissions. I had inadvertently pulled that down. Someone else had said that the data was there. I noticed that the data was there when I checked my copy that I'd pulled down, and immediately communicated it to BCP that it existed and confirmed with them that this leak was something that they knew about, and then went forward with my request sometime after that related to potentially talking about this. Ben said he did not wish to be part of our discussion with these things, but said, as it is here, if it's out there, and you're free to comment on it. I won't be offering my commentary or answering any questions about that.
Yeah, which is something which is a bit of kind of sad, I think, because we would have loved to discuss with BCP, because I think it's quite exciting to see some changes. Like, we weren't part of any playtest too.
Nope.
So we don't know about. We have the first iteration and we have the final product. Or I think it was the first iteration.
It was the first iteration, the final product. We have nothing. We don't have any of the rest in between. We don't have any of the details in between. And by BCP's rules related to playtests, no one can talk to us unless we are given explicit permission from the inner circle.
Yeah. So maybe our discussions or just guesses are online with why the changes happened the way they did, and maybe we are completely wrong. So it would have been really nice and really interesting to be able to discuss this with BCP, but
sadly, that is not the way it will
sadly, be. It didn't.
And last but not least, we delayed on this because our initial plan was to talk about this when we got our spoiler, but we decided against it, largely due to Jan pushing me that, hey, maybe not a good idea to blend those two things together. Henrik agreed, said good that no playtest is discussed, but of course you can make your own comments about how the card could have been. And that's sort of what we're going to do here, with Ben's approval, Henrik's sort of sign-off, and Hugh being a part of all of the vision. And one last opportunity for BCP to make any changes to this. We are releasing this to you. Our perception of what the cards were, our understanding of why we think that these cards made the changes that they made, and where they ended up with now. If you have different opinions, I look forward to this becoming a discussion that we can all have. But please, before anything else, keep one really important thing in mind. BCP has done a fine job, an excellent job in producing this product for all of us, in trying to make sure they're using good channels, good security, and good communication to produce cards that really do and deeply impact the game itself for our benefit. This should not be a thing where you just shit on BCP because you think that one card design was better than another. You're welcome to your perspective, but it's a lot of different perspectives in a lot of different regions and a lot of different metas to keep in mind here. Your meta isn't the meta that is everywhere else, and that means that, well, for your meta, this card might be better. For some other meta, this card might be worse. And until we have a consistent global meta that we can depend on and rely on for accurate data, for right now, we have to go on the information that we have. With that, let's crack on. So let's talk about the leak.
And the way we will do this is to first compare the crypt cards with the first iterations. And then after we've gone through, just compare the library cards as well.
Yep.
And these are sorted by clan too.
Yep, and so alphabetically by clan and by vampire.
Yeah, so we will start with Ravnos. Then we will have Salubri and then Tzimisce.
Yep.
Right?
Correct. And the first one that we're starting off with is Doc Martina. Not a lot of changes here, but some pretty significant changes nonetheless. Losing celerity is not unreasonable, and gaining superior animalism as a trade-off there really puts this vampire more into what its clan wants to see.
And what we will see also on a few cards is that often enough there's been a choice to add a superior version and let one inferior version go, which I think is quite reasonable for especially considering we are talking about Anarch cards here.
There's a lot of value you can have as an Anarch having access to celerity in addition to the rest of your disciplines. And also, if my theory is correct with Force March being around the corner, having more vampires than other clans that can Force March is going to be really valuable. Still don't know why that card didn't come out with the new Blood Toreador, but I'm trying to push it aside. But let's push aside Doc Martina and move to Gathi.
Yeah, what you can see here is also the mentioned lack or just loss of, in this case, fortitude for in favor of superior presence, which I think is also in line with what a clan wants. And also he has gotten a special ability text.
Yeah, and one that's like both positive and negative. I got to watch this guy get played a couple of times, and I mean, this ability is really no joke because of the consistency that it fires off to give you stealth. It's honestly a very, very impressive card with the changes.
Yeah, and I feel like being a 5-cap, he's still reasonably priced. And still being narrowed down in the abilities he can use as an Anarch.
Yeah.
Is something we should be in favor of.
Yep. But we could also choose whether or not we want to be in favor of Luciano Carvalho. I can never say that name right. I am so sorry for anyone who happens to have that last name. But this is a very, very interesting change of timing that happened in a vampire, and also a very interesting use of what I assume is ChatGPT for art. But I'll hold back my My
I'm
opinion's
quite sure Gines would not agree on being this ChatGPT out. Because I think BCP is quite fond of their artists. But anyway, what has been changed is from unlock phase to discard phase,
Mm-hmm.
and from an animal retainer from Luciano to another Ravnos, to from a vampire you control to another vampire you control.
Yeah.
So this is an incredible gain for flexibility on the cost for the unlock phase to discard phase.
Yeah, this almost makes it relevant to run as an add-on to a Nosferatu crypt, because you can bring him out, immediately use his ability to move a retainer from your locked vampire to your unlocked vampire, and have your blocker up and ready to go for whatever is about to happen, as opposed to having to wait all the way for a go-round, have Luciano do it, wait another go-around, have Luciano move it, in like the slowest fashion possible. Such a huge improvement, and very stealthy in the way that the wording initially might feel. A lot of people could overlook this very easily and think like, oh, this isn't such an improvement. But I think you'd have been much more disappointed having to play with the old Luciano versus the new Luciano.
Yeah. Quite curious about why they made the changes they did on this part here, because I feel like Ravnos are have a good speed right now, and
I'll throw a bit of my perception of this here. I think that when designing the clans, they're trying to make sure that every clan has at least two things that they can do out of the box. So you can open up the box, you can pick a direction to build your deck into. You can build into a bleed deck or X. And I feel like here what they wanted to do was like have a vampire that kind of said, hey, you can build your Ravnos into a sort of wall-ish style deck or a more defensive style deck. And this animal retainer strategy is one that you could use to be a little bit more like the Nosferatu if you wanted to build in that direction. I don't think the Ravnos are particularly good at surviving the follow-up to blocking, but presence can carry you a long way, right?
And animalism is still a thing, like animalism combat. And I think you're right. And even thinking about, they do have a lot of defensive options in library cards. So maybe we'll just keep it in mind and just
see if that pans out.
Yeah.
Going beyond that, though, we have Fibon. Fibon got a really, really useful ability added on that has a great cost to it as well. That dodge has been relevant when I played against it. Very, very relevant.
Yeah, because at one, being able to strike dodge is an improvement for itself. And being able to cycle, so being able to choose also how do you want to carry on with combat and how do you want to manage your hand is quite a feat in VTES.
Yeah, especially when you're in a clan that's actively going to have problems with being bloated on stealth cards. Their initial action doesn't inherently have stealth attached to it, so they're gonna have to play a little more stealth in hand by default. And now you have a vampire that, like, do you take the chance, right? Do you take the chance you might lose your bleed enhance card, but you have 5 other stealth cards in your hand? Maybe you just do it and hope that the universe doesn't hate you today. It's a fun little gamble to watch happen and to watch the player sit for a moment and really go, how much of a risk do I want to take to not potentially have the vampire end up dunked, or just at low enough blood I can't really use them anymore. But other significant changes, we have Roy.
Yeah, and while his disciplines didn't change, he's still a 2-cap. He's got the ability to, if he is unlocked during discard, you need to lock him.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, he gets 1 strength in combat with titled vampires. I think this is quite a nice concept too, which pushes a bit to use him, or like take the action if he gets locked anyway. But on the other hand, being locked in a blockier deck isn't as bad as he's an anarch, and there's something called organized resistance. And having a +1 strength in combat with title vampires, considering there are a lot of titles around, it is quite interesting.
To me, this actually does the opposite. This sets a bad precedent for me that for some reason a 2-cap with obfuscate seems to be like among the worst kinds of discipline spreads you can make. Right? Like, I feel like this and a 2-cap with dominate would both have to have some sort of negative ability, right? Where it's like a substantially negative ability that has some sort of like, but there's a positive attached, JK, ability. Like, it's not going to be super frequent that he's going to get into combat and that it's going to be a relevant combat, because sure, he can punch for 1 more, but only against titled vampires. It's also a vampire with obfuscate, so going to be more likely to get by in situations.
Yeah. But I think he has potential. Like, it is a nice catch because obfuscate. Carl said one time in his blog, gets things done.
Yeah,
which is absolutely right. And to say, okay, there's a 2-cap. He's as cheap. You can play it in almost every outcome of seating. Like, as soon as you're second, you get a vampire out.
Yeah.
And that you are forced to do something with him is an okay-ish cost, because having him sit around and just wait, it's not as nice. But this way, you're forced to do something, and if you're blocked, he isn't lost for nothing.
That's fair. I still will respectfully disagree, but I can understand your perspective.
Anytime.
But what we don't have to disagree with is whether or not Srilikya, I'm so sorry if I butchered that, and if you happen to have that name, whether or not this is a improvement or a non-improvement, because I feel like it's very hard to call this anything other than a direct improvement.
It is an absolute improvement. Like, there has been essentially 1 sentence crossed out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a
very important sentence to cross out. This would have been devastating to have an 8-cap just because they have all +1 disciplines at superior and a good special ability. It would be punishing, especially because like 8 to me, maybe I'm wrong on this, but 8 feels like the worst crypt the worst capacity that a vampire can have. 9 you can curve into more often better. 10 you can curve into better. 7 you can curve into better. I always feel like 8 is, am I in the last seat? No. Well, crap.
No, I don't necessarily agree. I mean, since I play V5 I can almost compare it to 7 caps, and I think almost every time the 8 caps have an interesting ability or nudge which tops them all over the 7 caps.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. That's the kind of the point I'm making, though, is that if she would have been the old version, it would have been insult to injury for I got an 8 cap that's actually functionally worse than a 7 cap that I could have had otherwise.
Yeah, sorry, that I must understand.
Gotcha.
With this, absolute agreement.
Yeah. So I think that brings us to, the other small vamp, Trung Chao Pham. Or Pham. I think that's Pham. This is a change.
Yeah. This is an absolute change, which I think is honestly interesting because, again, we have the loss of a discipline in favor of a superior one, which I think is fine as being anarch and having superior animalism.
In fact, one could argue this is a nerf in a lot of ways. Taking the lesser presence away from an anarch is tantamount to taking a superior discipline away from most other clans that want to play things at superior.
Yeah. This is, I mean, I wouldn't call it a nerf, but animalism is too good for it to be a nerf. But it closes a lot of possibilities, but it opens up others, like deep zone combat and cannon throws, 8 from bats.
Yep. There's a lot of things that it does that change what this vampire will do. It doesn't make it just a bleeder that you're throwing in because it's a low cap, easy to curve into kind of situation.
And it opens up more, if we take what you said from before, like a more defensive option. He's the better defender from his previous version, because I feel like superior animalism combat, as said, is a thing, like not the strongest one, but
not irrelevant.
Yeah, and just being able to block and play Majesty on inferior, it's nice, but won't get you again.
Yep. Well, from there we move into the Salubri, and we'll start with Aniel, who's got quite a bit of a difference here. Very interesting difference, too.
Yeah, because being able to burn one counter from any type from a minion in play.
It's got some interesting situations that can occur.
I know that I would have been a person to discuss if blood is a counter. And I think the change which has happened, like a corruption counter, makes sense thematically for Salubri, and or a card requiring a discipline from another ready minion.
That's so much stronger at that point.
It is, but depending on, I don't know how many types of counter are there. Like, I feel like there.
So I feel like the one that would be the most relevant is whether or not you can. Going back to the blood count, I think blood is one of the most important. Life would be another one. Do they technically count as counters on a minion? But I think that overall, being able to remove both positive and negative cards from another minion is really strong. Like, this could remove your... And remember, it's a card requiring a discipline. So this could be some types of equipment. This could be some other buff cards that let you get plus bleed. This could be cards that potentially give you permanent stealth. There's so many ways that this ability could be relevant.
What about retainers?
Yes, this would let you burn a retainer because it is a card that requires a discipline on another ready minion. The only sad part is she can't save herself.
Yeah, but the nice touch to Salubri is they have a lot of cards which they help out other vampires, so she doesn't need to do it alone.
Yeah. It's very good changes, but I feel like we're going to see this pretty consistently in the Salubri. especially as we move on here to Dominica.
Yeah, like, and this is something we'll see on the library cards as well, because the archetype cards have become quite a key element, in my opinion, to the Salubri deck. And since she is, and along with Shaka, I think, who has the ability to search for a equipment card, make you less dependent on luck.
Yeah.
Like, of course, you need to draw them, but a 1 in 12 chance is okay.
Yep.
And it's quite versatile too, because you can move it to your hand, and you don't necessarily need to use it, but why shouldn't you? Yeah, it gives you option.
It's nice that this card just got a straight up buff. But it is interesting, again, going back to the other 3 cap. I don't know if you've seen, but recently there was a thread talking about how independent vampires don't get a buff, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing special for independence. I'm sorry. Let's compare this 3 cap to the previous 3 cap we looked at, which has 2 discipline points. Oh, this one not only has 2 discipline points, but also special ability. I wonder if that's some sort of benefit you now get for being independent. Who knows? I mean, I can't say. I'm just looking at mathematics here, and shame if we count mathematics as something we can evaluate life based on. But hey, you be the judge. The data's there, though. The data's right there.
Yeah, but moving on.
Yeah, going from her, we've got Apikun.
Yeah, and he said once each combat involving a minion you control, Apikun can burn 1 blood to prevent all damage to that minion from the opposing minion's strike.
This feels so much more strong. This would have been far too good in regular play.
Yeah, because now he can burn 1 blood to prevent up to 2 non-aggravated damage. Which
it feels like they stopped the pendulum. They were like, the pendulum is swinging too far this way. Just put it in the middle and walk away. Like, no more pendulum anymore.
Like that kind of damage. I would have liked the first version better, but
I mean, why non-aggravated damage? That's my problem with this card. So I burn 1 to prevent 2, but it's once each comp. Oh, I missed this part. It's not just for him.
Yeah,
that's my misread on this. And I didn't realize the old version would have let you do that for any minion all the time. Holy Lord, that would have been insane.
What?
Yeah, once each combat involving a minion you control, he can burn 1 bullet to prevent all damage to that minion from the opposing minion strike. Could you imagine having a rolling with the punches for any vampire you choose at any time?
Yes, I could.
That's too much. That's Please. Too much.
No, I don't like emotional graphics.
Also, minion. This dude is protecting Jake Washington from miles away. No, thank you.
Good, though.
No, thank you.
I would have liked it.
For
me, it would have been fine.
A much better. I think this balance was very important. I think I could have seen Apikun getting very out of control.
Yeah.
So good balance decision here, especially in a clan that has access to, okay, on your turn, Apikun gets 3 more blood, and will just be 3 more rolling with the punches that you've drawn on a vampire on the table. So
they don't have a problem with prevention.
Yeah. Moving on from Apikun, there is Sakar, just another straight upgrade to a vampire, but with a little cost.
Yeah, he's now 6 cap, which compared to Dominica, who's remained 3 cap. Yeah, I think him being a 6 cap is okay, but he can search for the equipment card. You maybe want some sort of an archangel. So as the deck relies heavily on archetypes and has some key equipment cards, I think it's a wise decision, because I think Salubri are in a fine spot where they are now. But without these nudges, and maybe the ones we will see in the library cards, they could have been quite slow. I mean, they're slow even now, like until they get rolling.
Mm-hmm.
But with this, they have a little speed up.
Yeah. I am torn on this vampire every time I encounter it, because the move to hand is often somewhat punishing, but I feel like overall you have access to Superior Fortitude. It is a +1 stealth action, so you are getting good value out of it. It does correct what's happening if you have a bad draw. So overall, I would say that I agree with you. I always have that feeling of like, I wish there was some sort of in-between between hand and on. And I think that in-between should be something like maybe can then attempt to equip as a +1 stealth action or something like that. But that's minor overall. It just feels like it's bad action economy, especially in a game where every action matters a lot, to have to try to get it out onto your vampire again.
But I think actions are not as costly for Salubri, because they can freak drive the life away. And on the other hand, having the shard or London Museum.
Yeah, already give you that ability.
Yeah, they reduce the cost of what you play too.
Yeah.
So I think it is reasonably balanced.
Yeah.
Like, because with this, okay, you could take an equip action off of him to somebody else, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. From there, we've got Seraphina. And Seraphina was an interesting card to look at because, one, a lot of upgrades, some changes to her text overall, change to her capacity.
I think she has a mild enough in her ability text, like not to exceed starting life, which is not too bad. Everything else is quite a good push, because Salubri, I think they're lacking offensive capabilities from the base, and she has a nice version with blood sorcery and celerity. Yeah, very nice little bonuses. Combined with maybe different decks.
Yeah. From there, we move into the Tzimisce. And one of my favorite things that we'll notice in this is that some of the Tzimisce have the old splash for being anti-tribu on them in their original versions versus their current versions. I think a very interesting little touch as we're looking at some of the pre-release or the original pre-made versions.
But I don't know if this was honestly intended or just...
I think it's just simple. This was the template they had while they were doing it that didn't have a cleaned up Tzimisce logo. But this vampire is really interesting to look at the changes for, especially because big discipline changes, a capacity improvement, and a relevant ability added.
Yeah, and I think he's fine the way he is. He got to be. But he's one of the vampires who lost blood sorcery. There are a lot of them in Tzimisce who lost blood sorcery. And I think having superior animalism and potence and protein makes it a good enough combat.
And dominate in elder formats. This guy can basically play a 4-card combo that always dunks a vampire. Not dodgeable, not counter-strikeable, grapples you and deals you ag damage. If you really want to put it all together, you're going down. Unless you happen to be playing Eyes of Blades, which, if you're playing Eyes of Blades, what is wrong with your meta? then okay. But otherwise, this guy has everything he would need to insta-dunk you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but he has no ability to blood gain and to equip, which is, I think, a mentionable thing here.
Yep. Moving on from him, though, we've got Branimira. Go ahead.
Who also lost blood sorcery, and who lost protein in favor to animalism.
Yeah, and presence also. Oh no, gained presence in exchange for that blood sorcery that it lost. Yeah, very interesting change in this vampire. There was clearly this I think demonstrates like a clear balance change decision that had to have been made. I would love to hear like what happened in playtest with the old version of this vampire versus the new version of this vampire, because this feels very deliberate, right? You don't go from vampire with protean or with blood sorcery to vampire with presence without a big discussion about why that was such a relevant change.
Yeah, and it would be nice to see for this vampire especially the iterations in between, because I think there have been 3 or 4 playtest rounds.
Yeah, I think it was 3 ultimately, but it may have been 4.
Yeah, at least 3. So maybe the change was from protein to animalism first. I don't know.
I'm saying it this way, Ben. I want answers. I want answers now, Ben. Give me my answers. If no other question, this is the one. This is the one I want to know. Was blood sorcery too strong for the Tzimisce, or is it just a conspiracy? But going from there, we have Marialina. Very good improvements for this vampire.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an improvement.
It is. This vampire is too strong at existing discipline spread without a negative.
It's not an improvement.
Balancing things correctly is an improvement. I will die on this hill if I must.
Well, then down. But yeah, I think the change is reasonable either way, even if he dies on his hill. But yeah, she is strong enough.
Yeah,
like the way she is.
Yeah,
honestly,
even with the drawback, she's still gonna get the job done a lot.
Yeah, and protein is
strong.
One of the most strongest disciplines anyway.
Especially when combined with the either first or second strongest discipline for bleeding. So depending upon who you want to argue with. But from a good balanced decision. And actually one of the other things we missed on that is the crypt decision, moving her to be group 6 and not group 7. I would love, that's another one that Leslie so, but still would love to know the decision behind.
I just see all of them have been changed to group 6 from group 7.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, because as we go into Nasirian, it's the same thing. From 7 to 6, and here we see more of that blood sorcery again that disappeared.
Honestly, for everybody, like all of them have been group 7.
Huh. Did not initially notice that.
This is the thing I honestly would find quite interesting. So, if anyone from BCP, no, we said it right now.
No, keep pressuring them. Keep pressuring them. No, let's look at Nasirian for real though.
I think she is probably the vampire with the most changes in total.
Yeah.
Like losing again blood sorcery, gaining superior animalism, losing protean,
getting
like superior
inferior.
Protean, yeah, and getting superior dominate, losing Auspex too.
But getting celerity for it?
is really quite much. And even, I mean, this is a huge change in what you can do with a vampire in itself.
Yeah.
And then what has been changed too is while you control one or more locations, Nissarian gets 1+1 bleed was the first one, and now it's +1 vote. So I think the loss of the +1 bleed to the +1 vote does make sense, but just because there's only one vote card in the deck they have, but I think, yeah, this is the card I really don't quite understand in total, because the changes, because I think the Tzimisce deck as it is now tries to do a lot of things at once and doesn't get anything done in a way at least I can play good or...
Yeah, it does feel like a mess. You open the box up, you shuffle it, and you're like, "What? This deck can't be everything all at the same time." You've got to pick a direction, and the vampires sort of feel that way as well. This is that example of we wanted every box to have different flavor options, but we put too many in the box.
Well, I think the +1 bleed would have been more consistent, like...
Yeah, but it's so bland and so strong for a clan that, especially if this guy had superior or if she had superior protean, that's a huge problem right there.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, she got +1 bleed and +1 stealth, if you think about it, since she can play bonding.
Yeah.
Now, but I think maybe she's the one card who wants to open up the perspective for new blood, like,
yeah,
perhaps going into a political direction.
Yeah. I think that'll end up being the case now. But I think before, what we're looking at is, again, there's that blood sorcery that seems to speak that there was something going on where the blood sorcery package was just too strong when blended with other cards. It's almost like giving Anarchs the ability to get all the locations and vehicles they need, especially when they have locations that give you bleed and vehicles that give you stealth. It just was working out kind of like a balance problem. I wonder if that had anything to do with it. How about it, Ben? Did it have something to do with it? But maybe we'll never know.
Yeah, you see, we've been a bit disappointed by you not joining, but we hope you enjoy it anyway, as well as we do.
Yes. From here, though, we have Susie Kano. This is a pretty just lateral change.
But I think that's a significant balance change.
Oh, I would agree as well.
3-card with Protean, no, thank you.
Yeah. And Dominate, like, I'm sorry, please, I would opt out. Just get this vampire off the table. It's going to be annoying every time. Giving it animalism, much less annoying. Far, far less annoying.
Yeah, and still strong enough.
Yeah. Whisper, though, here we go again. Look what's here. What do we got?
I don't know. And I wonder why they put even in so much blood sorcery, like in every other vampire.
Yeah. It's crazy. There's not, other than the Toreador, there is not another clan who had this obvious a fourth discipline as this one did before the balance change clearly happened for them.
No, that's wrong. The Malks have the fourth discipline in presence.
I feel like there's only 3 of them that had it, though.
No, it's 6.
Okay.
At least.
Okay.
So
this is close. This is, yeah, we've already passed through 4 of them that have had the blood sorcery and then lost it in the translation. At least here, there's gains.
But for the monks, for example, I can understand it. and for Toreador with Fortitude too. No, have they Fortitude?
Yeah, it was
No.
Fortitude. Many of them have Fortitude. I think the number is 5, if I remember correctly.
Fortitude is not in clan.
Correct. It is not in clan. They are normally Presence, Auspex, and Celerity.
But I wonder why Blood Sorcery was supposed to be the fourth clan discipline. Because does it make sense in any thematical way, like fluff reasons?
I don't know. I would love to know. For those of you that are also interested, let's get like a hashtag BS conspiracy going in the Discord comments and on as many different things as we can. I think it's a really cool hashtag, BS conspiracy. Let's see it happening.
No,
well, from there, we're going to start getting into actions. So I think we're going to take a quick break before we dive into what was the preview card that we had access to.
And before we do, let's make a short recap on the crypt. Like, I think we've talked about it quite a while, but in total, you could say a lot of additional disciplines has been lost.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost always opted in favor for less disciplines in favor of less disciplines and more superior versions.
Yeah.
Which also is reflected in their library. So quite interesting choices. And very interesting to see what they did for the Salubri.
Yeah. I agree. All right. Well, we'll take a short break for you in the podcast. That might be an ad that you'll get to see, but I promise it'll be a good one. When we get back, we'll talk about what's up with the changes to Feast of Souls Secrets. This portion of the video is for my top 10% of viewers. Those of you that aren't can just do what you're going to do anyway and skip this part of the video. This will probably be about 2 minutes long. I just wanted to say to the rest of you, thanks. It's really nice to have people that can actually make it to the end of a video and enjoy it. I also want to make sure I thank all the people who give comments on the video. It's really fun getting to both see your opinions and argue with you when you're very clearly wrong. Because I'm never wrong. Never, ever, ever. So thank you. Thanks for helping me feel like this channel is worth putting my time and effort into. You guys have made doing this VTES stuff very fun. Sorry, the content's been a little behind lately. It's been a little hard to find groups to play together now that people are kind of getting back into the live scene. But I am working on some new things, so hopefully you'll be seeing more of things in the very near future. And Jan and I have some new projects for stuff to talk about on the podcast. There should be episodes starting to roll out a little bit more in the coming months. Been dealing with a lot lately, and it's been really hard dealing with it. But I'm hoping that the downtime's over and I can finally get back to doing something I really enjoy, which is making this content for all of you and myself. I do enjoy it. It's a fun, creative outlet, and I enjoy getting to hear back from all of you. Can't wait for somebody to call me a shill one day and mean it. Thanks. Feast of the Souls Secrets. This card got both buffed and nerfed at the same time. Oops.
Yeah, but I think essentially it is more of a buff. Way more of a buff.
Mm-hmm.
Because first thing is losing the amalgam for Auspex.
Yeah.
And being able to add 2 blood, I mean, it's 3 blood, has it been before, to 2 blood? But
also to your uncontrolled vampires.
Yeah, it's gained more flexibility, so it is an absolute buff. Yeah. I don't see any nerf here. Like being flexible if you want to replenish your vampire you have in the control already, or if you just want to get another, is quite good.
To me, the nerf here is the addition of the younger vampire side. That is such a big change here, because this could have been a card that you have your smaller vampires do. I get that it's done entirely for balance issues, right? Could you imagine somebody like Ingrid Russo empowering one of your bigger vampires by just free drive, or not free driving, by daring the dawning herself into torpor periodically, so you can just pull her out.
But honestly, I don't think it has been enough, effectively, because if you think about who has superior aspects and superior dominate, it's gonna be all the vampires, like 6 cap at least, rather than 7 caps.
Yeah, my thinking into the development changes is they dropped the auspex because it seemed like this was too limited for to vampires that could do it, and then they realized, giving all that blood to a bigger vampire is also problematic, because when you have the ability to just force of will your way into it, or daring the dawn your way into it, and always get it, then that vampire can always come back and rescue you and still get value out of it.
So you think it had 2 iterations, one was the removal of auspex, which has been playtested, and then it has been realized it's too much. So it's the younger vampire.
Yeah, I think the complaint was we're never able to see this card work, so we want to know if the card even works. Let's strip the auspex from it and see what happens. And then I think they found as superior dominate alone, giving 3 blood to literally any vampire you control was a big problem, and so it had to get a slight modification, but the nerf felt too big to take it to just younger vampire and maybe down a blood, and so it became, what if we also did uncontrolled as well? So I think this probably saw the widest gamut of changes over its life cycle.
Yeah.
That'd be my theory anyway.
I think it's reasonable. But I mean, it came out the good way.
I would agree. Card I'm very proud that we got to preview as well. Very, very strong card.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, it will become, or even is, a signature card already.
From there, we've got Forced Confessional. Here's another card that got a sort of nerf, but in the right direction. A buff in some ways, a nerf in some other ways.
Yeah. Also, it's the loss of the amalgam, auspex amalgam. But also the blocking minion gets only -1 intercept instead of 2. I think 2 would have been nice for the Salubri.
2 for... I think if you're keeping it as auspex and dominate, the 2 makes sense from a power perspective. I think giving dominate a +2 stealth card is too strong.
Well, it's clan specific.
It is clan specific, but it's also a clan that is basically a clan that already existed before in disciplines, and that can benefit pretty heavily from it by having, I don't know, a card that lets you bleed for 3 and also put blood on your uncontrolled vampires. Yeah, you got it. And it's superior. At superior, I really feel like this ability is a little too strong.
Well, I don't think so, because maybe it could have been an amalgam, but they need ways to get stuff done. Because when I see people talking in the Discord about law firm decks, which is in some way Salubri, the direction Salubri are going, they're saying you don't have as many actions as you need. So I think giving the ability to actually focus on one or two blockers and taking one out is okay.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's a line. I would say this is a very close line, and I would need to play around with it more and see ultimately how I really feel.
Yeah, but I don't think it is. It depends maybe what we get out of New Blood.
Yeah.
For new Salubri cards.
I would agree. From there, we have in the Tzimisce direction, we have Monstrous Form. I don't like either version of this card. I think the new version is obviously better than the old version, but
well, is it? I mean, the new version has an action, which is quite pricey.
Yeah.
You get a card which stays on permanent and is flexible. Like you can give a plus one strength, or one maneuver, or one press. But you need a lot of them to work.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. It almost does feel a little like a nerf, because losing that other ability, in the original, it's a card that is a combat powerhouse, giving you an additional strike plus an additional press plus the extra strength for the whole combat, is a lot better than if I take an action to equip this. Then I can maybe get one of these three things. If I equip more than one of them, maybe it can be better than that. But yeah, I think I'm more inclined to agree with you here.
Yeah, well, I think I like the new Monstrous Form, but I think you need to think of ways to utilize it effectively. Because you get safe cards. Like, if you play one Monstrous Form all the time, you need to draw it, and because it's one per combat, well, it had been one per combat, and now you can play on inferior one each round.
Yeah.
Well, which stacks, by the way.
Yeah.
So it does have quite a nice synergy. So you can run a lot of them, take some actions to get them into play, and then just play the inferior version, get a press, get another plus one strength. So I think so. It is a card which is hard to utilize, but if you do, you get something out of it.
Yeah, I still feel like I wish, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I feel like I wish we would have gotten the old version. But maybe it was judged too strong, and that's why we ended up with the new version.
Well, I think Protean getting plus one strength per round, like, is honestly strong.
Yeah.
Because there's this way of damage I don't like to talk about.
It's traumatic. All right, well, let's take you away.
I don't like to play combat decks, but
let's take you away from that trauma and into something maybe less traumatic, like having some night terrors.
But
this card would have been ridiculous as its non-semi-nerfed version.
Well, I don't think it would have been ridiculous, because only usable by a blocking vampire. I'm glad that this one got removed, because this inclines so many timing problems. Like, if I just take it correctly, I can play three of them, but everyone needs to try to block. So, yeah, I think this way it's more flexible.
Yeah, my issue with the old version is it's not clan specific, so it means that it ends up being thrown in so many more decks. And to give Obfuscate and Presence a card that like is better than Auspex for being able to block in many ways is a little bit crazy to see.
I missed that. But yeah. Clan specific now, it wasn't before.
Yeah. So I agree with you that the removal of only usable by a block vampire is like the right decision if you're going for a Ravnos specific clan card. But even with that on there and it being non-clan specific, it's such a much more powerful ability. And when I saw the playtest, I was like, I really hope this card doesn't make it to final print, because the last thing I need is like a bunch of random other clans really utilizing this to its full potential that might have access to Auspex. Could you imagine like having a vampire with Auspex, Obfuscate, and Presence that like builds up your stealth to like, I got 6 stealth on you, and you're just like, no, you got nothing. Try again.
I would have loved it for my Nosferatu deck.
Yeah, exactly. So it would have been more of a night terror for everybody else than you.
Absolutely.
I think these may have ended up getting, some of these slides may have ended up getting mixed up, because next up we go into Obedient Flesh. So we are jumping around a little bit. Sorry about the discipline incongruity. I thought I'd clean these up. But here we're into a Tzimisce, not Tzimisce card.
Yeah. But
it's kind of weird because this is a card that really didn't change except to gain a cost attached to it.
Yeah, but I think the cost is reasonable.
Yeah, I think even for just the inferior ability, it was already really strong. That alone would have warranted the +1. And then the combat effect is a lot that you get. And I wonder if this may have been part of why that the monstrous form got changed, because stacking this with monstrous form would have been insanely strong. Getting 2 strength in the round, 2 optional maneuvers, a prevention, and an additional strike. I mean, you would have been a monster.
Yeah.
So,
and still, we're talking about protein combat.
Yeah. Yep. I think this was very much so a good decision, and I'm sure that came up in playtesting. Like, I'm sure this card was such a problem to deal with before it cost the blood. Going further than that, though, we have another Tzimisce card of One with the Land. Another card where the text is a lot to sort of sort through and figure out what has changed here. But once you realize it, it makes a lot of sense why the decision was made. So here they still get the intercept from the inferior. Still the condition that it has to be usable during an action directed at you or a card you control. But the superior is no longer an as above text. You don't get the strike combat ends anymore if you use the intercept.
Yeah. By the way, it's even the opposite. It's neither combatant can strike during the first round.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. My brain does this every time I see this card. It rolls it in the reverse.
Yeah, like from can from 1 strike combat ends to not being able to strike. But if you have Adelino, who is a mandatory press, you can still be in combat and be happy.
Yeah.
If you want to be.
It's a very, very interesting series of changes that happened. And again, this is another one where, like, the development conversation had to have been interesting. Like, the talks in playtesting, the decision to significantly change the mechanics of the superior version of this card. Like, I can understand that in its initial form, it's a little too strong. that ability to get +2 intercept and also get a potential combat ends effect can get you out of a lot of situations and really let you wall up, especially considering you also have access to a lot of the Anarch cards for intercept, as well as really good Protean abilities. Just seems like it might be a little too strong to go to a completely different ability that emulates another ability and also negates entirely striking completely.
Yeah. So, very interesting.
Yeah.
Why?
So too is the changes to this original novel of a card, Salut's Avenging Fist. There was a lot that got changed here. First and foremost, there is the fact that it previously dealt 1 additional damage with melee weapons, which meant that the old version of this card gave you 2 damage bonus if you were striking with a melee weapon, which is very strong for only 2 pool, and just because you're putting it on a Salubri.
Especially if you consider what melee weapon we're talking about in this deck, which is called Sword of the Archangel, who can unlock if you make egg damage. I don't get it right now. You'll have it. Hold on.
Well, he's doing that though. You add to this the fact that you're able to rush. I mean, in the old version, at least used to be a younger non-Salubri vampire, but having a rush in addition to having a weapon that now does 2 additional damage is terrifying in many cases. I'm not surprised this got changed out of its current iteration to only giving you a permanent strength, which is in many ways a buff. I mean, I guess not really a buff. I'm sorry. It is in many ways still good, but not quite as good as a total of +2. But the buff that came here to counter it was now you can enter combat with literally any non-Salubri vampire instead of the age restriction. And then also the really, really important part on these cards, which was making them into archetypes. That was fantastic. Great decision.
Yeah. And I think it also just is good from a new player's perspective, because archetypes are something which are already introduced, and making cards something which you can create synergy, maybe Dabbler or just Rebel from the archetype. So I think it's quite fine to use keywords.
Also, to not have this line that has to be like, cannot be put on a vampire with a card named blah, blah, blah. Just.
That's what I.
Yeah. But there's a whole line of these cards. We got a few to get through. Next up is the Healing Touch listed in Avenging Fist.
The effect, what has been changed, is also that it has been made an archetype, and which has made it searchable for the addition for the effects, if you remember.
Yep.
For what was it, Shakar?
Yep.
No, Dominica.
But that's not all it has changed. It can also shuffle it also used to be able to shuffle back up your allies from your ash heap, or take a non-Tremere vampire in your ash heap and put it in your uncontrolled region, which really would have been a very strong and interesting sort of archetype to try to do. A lot of ways that you can really make a Wurgle deck more powerful by being able to cycle them back in, cycle in the things you need, be able to pull them back up, or also to be able to. This actually really would have made Daring the Dawn a very strong strategy here, because you can shuffle back in your guys that you lose and keep cycling them over and over and over again.
I think I got a brain freeze.
It's all right. Looking at the newer version, we lose that ability in exchange for basically your Salubri being able to take an action to give blood or life to another minion. Kind of a bit of a sadder ability, but the rescue from torpor ability that is free also gives the rescued vampire 1 blood, sort of making it a negative for you to use this as just a dunk a guy, send my guy to rescue cross table to dunk again. It's not really a fame combo as much because now you're throwing blood back on them each time you do it.
Yeah. But a card we haven't in this slideshow, for the reason we don't have the previous version, because it has been introduced later, is Soulord's Guiding Wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the third archetype who has been introduced. Like, it hasn't been in the list we got, so it's either in the second or third iteration from playtest had been introduced, and which honestly really shifts the deck's focus on these archetypes. Like, there's something they want you to build on.
Yep.
And what has also not been is meditating growth.
Yeah. Which was important that they put that there. I think that's a great card. I think it's a great example of giving something beneficial to Salubri. And also it goes back into the independents don't get anything.
Yeah. And I think, by the way, the cave is quite a nice way to think about hunting grounds from a new perspective, because as of now they don't do anything like in quote unquote not really.
I think we'll see more stuff like that in the very future, especially as it pertains to certain things that BCP is allegedly not paying attention to.
Yeah.
From Salat, though, we're going to go to maybe the opposite of healing touches with Sculpt the Flesh. This was a very interesting card to change. What we see here is a change in how the aggravated damage is happening. Damage goes from being all hand strike damage aggravated to being a strike inherently.
And it is a 2 damage strike, which now is a hand strike at +1 damage. And considering the other Tzimisce cards who have also +1 strength, I think Sculpt the Flesh in the version right now is the better version, or has more synergy with them.
Yeah.
Because in the first version, in the first iteration, it has been cut up to 2. And now it's +1, so everything is up.
Yeah. It means that you can play this around a grapple. They also changed the secondary effect. So in the old version of this, originally the attached minion was going to get -1 strength, and they could burn the card as a +1 stealth action, just like it is now. In the new version, however, it's during your unlock phase, you burn a blood or life. So this is a really big punishing card as well. Like, even if you get grappled, you still got a really solid answer in either being able to ag strike down the opponent, or if you know the opponent can easily pull themselves back out of torpor, stick this on them and force them to have to burn through some of the blood to get it back. And then also taking the cost of this card down because you no longer have as powerful a primary ability really makes this card feel more playable and more enjoyable.
Yeah.
From Sculpt the Flesh, we move on to that card Jan has talked about 3 other times in the current podcast, Sword of the Archangel.
Yeah, because honestly, it has a lot of synergy. And
it does. In the early version, this card was much stronger. Minions opposing the bearer cannot play grapple cards.
I would have not. And strike +1 strength, like this is and like strength +1 aggravated damage. And if the opposing vampire is burned during the weapon's strike resolution, the beer can unlock at the end of the combat.
By the way, that's not limited.
Oh yeah.
You can cut someone down, wake up, and cut someone down again. And in the original iteration, remember, you had a built-in rush on your vampire if you got Avenging Fist, and we're swinging for 4 aggravated damage every freaking time, with Apakun sitting on the side to give you full healing every time you did it.
Yeah. But still, I think Salubri have gotten quite a few changes, because I think even given the sword was as good, you needed to draw it.
Yeah. It is interesting that as they made it so that you couldn't accidentally hit the best thing ever, they gave you the ability to, like, hey, you can at least find the tools to do something really cool from time to time in your vampires. It's a nice compromise they managed to do in this. I really do think the Salubri are like a sort of masterclass on how do you take a clan that was doing too much of the thing you want them to do too well and make them into a, like, when they happen to randomly get it, and instead try to make them into a clan that can more consistently do the thing that you want them to appear the most like they can do.
Yeah, and also not being able to play grapple cards has been changed to once each combat. You can burn 1 blood to cancel a grapple or aim card, which is quite nice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't like aim cards because I think it's something unnecessary. But this is something we should go into.
Yeah.
We have talked about combat some other time.
Additionally, they limited the ability to wake yourself after burning a vampire. Also, a very important change to have made between the 2 weapons.
Well, you can unlock.
No, but you can only do it once each turn. You are no longer able to do it over and over and over again, unlike the original iteration. Yeah. So very good changes to the weapon. Still keeps it a really cool, really flavorful, and kind of a strong weapon. But in the original version, this thing would have been a nightmare to deal with. So if somebody got fully powered, you were just done. Seriously good decision on BCP's part, and I like where it ended up.
Yeah. It still is a really strong card.
Yeah. Agreed.
But I am wondering if what subsequent changes have been made, like if the version we are seeing, like what ended up in the finally had some iterations in between and what they would have been like.
Yeah. Did they change these abilities kind of one at a time as they went, or was it like a sweeping change that they just decided on? Were there maybe multiple versions of this they were playtesting initially? Because I've heard they do this, like different people get seeded different things. And was this like the one that we just happened to see, and maybe there were some other people trying other iterations of it? Either way, this would have made my playtesting time really annoying. Especially because there's already
as long as you would have been able to play it.
Yeah. But a card Jan has mentioned a lot less that we're going to talk about is the Touch of Valorin. This changed, and it's not a lot of change. Again, there's the not being able to exceed starting life that is obviously really important.
Well, it has been changed. Like, it lost the amalgam again. Mm-hmm. Like, a few cards had amalgams.
Yeah, and that needed it, because this card would have felt really bad to play if you needed 2 disciplines on top of it to play it. But also, there is the I thought there was a thing that had changed
And
about the last one.
what should be mentioned, the prevent all damage
There it
from
is.
the opposing minion strike effect has been made inferior.
Yeah.
So, which makes it a good playable card, opposed to superior aspects and fortitude.
Yeah.
Where you still have a better version, like hidden strength, which just prevents one and gives you.
Yeah, this would have been such a bad value at this cost. I'll pay 1, need to have 2 disciplines at superior to prevent a single strike against me. What?
Yeah.
I'm not good at math, but I know that's bad math. So, we've got from there another Salubri card in Unleashing the Bestial Soul. This was a big change in card. This is another one of those that almost became an entirely different card from original iteration to final iteration.
Yeah. Like, again, lost the amalgam, but lock a minion controlled by your predator or prey.
For free.
For free. It's completely different from choose a minion, cannot play reaction cards this action.
Yeah.
Like, completely different take on how to deal with other minions.
Yeah. What's interesting is then apply, like, the ability you get from the inferior on the new version is an ability you would have only had as a superior iteration in the other version on the minion that you already ended up locking in the first place. So it's a very interesting transition that sort of explains like where their decision making is in terms of cost. One blood appears to have a lot of value here.
Yeah, and I think the new version is also the more balanced one, because that a minion cannot play reaction cards is quite strong.
Yeah.
By itself, but if he stays unlocked, he can at least attempt to block the next action again.
Yep.
And considering we're talking about a law firm deck, it is a reasonable balanced way, since you need to take a lot of actions, and if you could lock, then the prey or predator, whoever wanted to block, would need to have a wake too. So
yeah, I think locking a minion as an action modifier is far too strong. The ability to like do something that normally an action card has to be essential for is really damaging to the game, because essentially 3 actions could ensure your predator is dead on the next turn. Like, I can get a Smiling Jack for 2 cards that doesn't get passed on to my prey. I'll take it 100% of the time. Like, this card would have been far, far too strong in its original iteration, even with both disciplines. But instead, we get a card that is much more fun to play, and the superior of Unleashing the Bestial Soul, I really enjoy. In addition to stopping that minion from being able to play reaction cards, any other minion that tries to play a reaction card needs to spend an additional blood or life for that next reaction card, which is most likely for them going to be either a bounce or trying to get some kind of intercept to stop whatever it is that you're doing. And that's going to be really important. You're basically trading a 1-for-1 on something you know is essentially about to happen. Very good changes.
Yeah. But moving on to the next. Visions of Gehenna.
Another big change.
Was a change. Like, from Obfuscate to Presence. From +1 stealth to cannot block this action.
Just allies.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Allies cannot block. And only usable as announced, and minions with the illusion counters, which we haven't heard from before anyway. Cannot block this vampire. Burn if all your illusion counters if this action is successful. And I think the current version, I don't like as many counters. Like,
Yeah.
It's just another thing added. But maybe this is also the reason why the ability to
Seraphina's ability changed. Yeah.
Because illusion counters had been dropped.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
No, go on.
I think this, when I first saw illusion counters, I was like, oh, this is dumb. We don't need yet another counter type that is like only usable for the card that's playing it and maybe one more card, and just add something more for players to have to track. It felt kind of silly. So seeing like what Visions became, it's a very strong card, and I'm very annoyed at times when playing against this card that this card exists. But I'm glad it's not a card that just makes counters like, ugh. Yeah. Or that interacts with the counters, I should say. But following that, though, is another Visions card, and another card that was way better before they made the nerf change to it that I think is really important. And that's Visions of Zapathathura.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, the cost of the superior changed. Like, reduce the bleed to 0 and lock this minion vampire too.
Well, it got a blood cost added to it as well. It was originally going to be free, which I feel like would have been... I hesitate to say it would have been too strong. I think for the inferior effect, this is actually priced pretty right. 0 for a card that requires both presence and obfuscate, giving you a bleed reduction of 3, I think is fine. But at superior, reducing the bleed to 0 feels like maybe a little too much for free.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think locking is which has an effect to leave you open for the next attack, makes you think about on how you want to use it. Do you want to reduce it by 3, or do you want to reduce it for 5 with the chance that you get another bleed which comes along for 5 or 6?
Yeah.
And you can't do anything about it.
I'm in full agreement. This makes the card feel more like what I feel like they intended the card to feel like, instead of being a card that would just be a far too dominant a card in preventing basically every bleed that comes your way.
So, moving on to our last and worst of Sophia. I tried. I hope I got it.
I don't like this card.
Well, I do like it. I like it at least because the way it is now better. Because the way it was at first seemed like just another war rule.
Yep.
And now it does something unique. Like, you can argue if this is too much, but still, it's something different than war rule.
Yeah, before it only got to shoot for 2 range damage instead, but it had the same cost. Still to burn an ally or retainer you control to put it into play. Still has a rush against not any minion this time, but just against vampires in the original version, and went to become minion in the later version. So 2 big buffs there, more range damage, and any minion. But then during the unlock phase, a Tzimisce has to pay in order to raise the blood back up of the ally of Vazd. Whereas now you can just discard an ally or retainer to give Vazd back the life that it lost.
2 life
Mm-hmm.
instead of 1.
Yeah.
So
also not limited. We should add it does. You can do this whether or not VTES needs it. VTES can very quickly become an overwhelming card that also gives you the ability to cycle in a deck where you might have an excess of allies or retainers, or just be running quite a few, up to and including tossing copies of her herself to help make her even more of a bloaty house.
yeah. Oh, I forgot that allies have no limit.
Yeah. So.
And being able to discard again leaves you more room for hand management and also deck construction.
Yeah.
So I like it better than the way it is now.
I think, going back to my problem with this, I think though the problem with this card is it still doesn't feel, for 3 pool, it still doesn't necessarily feel strong enough. It is at least nice that it has the ability to either close range or long range shoot. I think the life ability is really fun, really useful. Obviously, it needs to be able to rush anything, but there always feels like this balancing act you have to do with allies and with the pool total that it costs. At 2 pool, I feel like this thing is probably too strong. At 3, it's on that line of like, do you really want to accidentally permanently lose a lot of pool because it's an ally and they just die when they're done? I don't know. Cards like this always make me feel kind of uncomfortable, especially when they have no built-in aid to make them survive that happens in part of combat.
Yeah, but I think it has a built-in aid to help him survive, or her.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So
I think it is honestly reasonable.
Yeah.
So, and what does Wargul do again?
Wargul has a rush and can prevent 1 damage each round. And only has melee strikes. It does not have range strikes.
So I think it is quite a nice touch compared to Wargul, because not being able to prevent, but to get life from a discard, that's something different.
Yeah,
like not strong, but different.
What they did for her definitely turned her into a much better card. When I saw the original version of this card, I was just disappointed. I was like, oh, you printed a bad Wargul because you wanted to be able to shoot at range. Forcing my Tzimisce to have to keep paying for my Wargul's damage sucks. I don't want to spend my game like doing that, especially if I get punched for 2. Now it's going to take me 2 turns to pump it back up. So it is a nicer touch. The new ability to heal, the better damage distance is better as well, and being able to see Jake Washington or somebody else is also super useful. So all in all, though, in all of this, I think this is an amazing job. I don't feel like I looked at any of these cards and felt like mad that they had nerfed the cards. I don't feel like I felt in any way like they had damaged the game. Every one of these feels like there was a clear reasoning behind it. Even if Ben needs to tell us the reason they chose and whether or not we're right about it. It still feels like there is a reason behind the decisions that they made.
Yeah, and I think also, while we have only scratched the surface of the discussions, because also, again, we have not been part of the playtest, I think it shows quite in a nice way that the discussion about the involvement can help or just gain insight. Like, it's been a long day for me. I'm sorry.
I want to, what I want to do though most at the end of this is I want to reinforce the idea that this is not something for you to assume you knew better or to assume a card because it would have been better for your play group would have been better for everybody else. this took a lot of time and effort for them to go from the original version to the final form. And I think I love development discussions. I think that being able to have insight into why some of these cards ended up there, I think that would be great. One of the things I would like to see done, if you really want to in some way push something to BCP, is reinforce an idea that, hey, it would be a cool idea to take 1 or 2 cards out of every set and talk about how they've changed and why they've changed. Even if you do it afterwards, it doesn't need to be during the development process, but it's a really interesting look to see, like, this was this, this was this. Can we figure out automatically why it was that way? Or is there some kind of ether that we need to figure out in between to understand how it got from point A to point B?
Yeah. And also, like, with the Tzimisce member who got the vote, like, to see there's some ideas, like, we don't know. We don't have any more info, but even on different things. But still, I think you can see there's a lot of effort put behind and a lot of thought put in the development process, and I think also in the development of products in general.
Yeah.
So
I think, like a lot of people doing Magic, there's a lot of these arguments that happen about, like, oh, why isn't BCP just doing this? Like, oh, it's so easy. And you look at these cards and you can realize, like, no, one point of damage between things, one simple wording change dramatically changes an entire card. Enough of those across a number of cards, like we saw for the Salubri, can result in you creating a monster akin to like some of the most undefeatable final bosses that you've seen in games, that are just rolling around the table, cutting off the heads of every vampire they see.
Because they can prevent you. They can only deal for egg damage. They can prevent.
Yeah, you don't want to. Trust me, that's a world you don't want to live in. And it is because of the work of the playtesters of this game, because of the work of BCP putting in development time, that really make the cards that we get to see at the end shine. And you might think they're too weak, but there's odds are somebody has play tested the card in a way that you think would be stronger and come to the realization that it's probably too strong the other way it would have been, and they're not putting in minimal time. You can see the substantial changes made to some of these that clearly took time, effort, and energy to come to the final decision on.
I think one can also see that almost every of the changes, in my opinion, all of the changes came out for a better version.
Yeah.
Or at least a more defined and a more inline version, a more balanced version.
Yeah.
Of course, it's cool to run around with 4 egg damage if you're on one side, if you're on the right side. But to see BCP, sometimes I'm a bit sad why they take so long to playtest, because I was hoping for the Sombra decks.
Yeah,
that promises already.
So was I.
And, but still, if you can see the difference you're seeing now, or you have been seeing the whole video, I'm glad to wait. Rather have a defined product, and it will probably come out good.
Yeah.
Instead of just getting more content. And
I agree.
Get some mixed up cards to which need to get banned or something else.
Yeah. In the end, the most important thing we can say, though, is thank you to BCP, but thank you most to the playtesters. You guys, I know, put a lot of time into what it is that you do, and you, in many ways, are the unspoken lifeblood of this game. I really appreciate the work you do and the communication that you have with BCP. I really respect your devotion to silence that you have in doing all this. It is super important. I know people that have been playtesting for a while, and it's always interesting to have this feeling when you're talking about something and they aren't saying anything and you know it means something and you just wish you could like tie them up in a room and gradually get them to tell you what is going on. But if you did that, they wouldn't be doing the job that they're supposed to do, which is testing out how something works in an environment where it is designed to be tested and without the influence of people who might have biases that are unspoken to the game. In the end, again, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. Also, thanks VCP for letting us do the video.
Yeah, we appreciate that a lot. We hope this has been informative. We hope you had a lot of fun, and we'll see you next time.